Good afternoon. I see people are coming in, and we have already 10 participants. I guess we wait a couple of more minutes to see how many of you will join us before we do the official welcome round. But I see we have people from Croatia, from Berlin, from Croatia again, from the UK. So, okay, with this, I would say we have 3 minutes over the time, and I guess we could start. So again, a warm welcome to everyone to this second webinar of the ESE Nordic community. My name is Ines Steffens. I'm together with Brean, the chair of the Nordic chapter, and today we will have a very exciting topic to cover because it's not really the mainstream direction that Are and his team have taken. And so the question is, do print journals still have a role? And before I will introduce Are, I wanted to just say that at Eurosurveillance, the journal for which I am responsible, we had a 5-year cycle in which we downscaled print issues. So in 2004, we switched from a monthly print edition to a quarterly print edition. And then after another 5 years, we decided that we would also cease with the quarterly edition and we would just publish special issues on occasion or compilations. And in 2014, by coincidence, another 5 years later, I realized we were writing a short note to our readers. We're fully online journal. We said, in our attempt to work in an environmental friendly and cost-effective manner, we decided to stop the print edition. So Brean, who is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Norwegian Medical Association, will now tell us why at his journal there was another decision taken. So Ore, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ines. And yeah, you're right. We have also, of course, scaled down our print issues. A few years ago, we had 24 per year, and now we have 15. So we're definitely going down in volume, but we're not going totally away from print, and that's the topic of today's presentation. I'll come back to that a bit later. I'll try to share my presentation, which with a bit of luck, you will soon be able to see. So what on earth is this illustration doing here? Not related to this meeting at all. Our digital manager yesterday prompted the chat GPT to illustrate the following prompt: Are Brean sorting manuscripts? And this picture is what ChatGPT came up with. I thought that was a fitting start because even artificial intelligences obviously associates the word manuscript with paper, which is interesting in itself. Not to speak of how handsome I look. That's another thing. And to think of it, we talk about scientific articles as papers. I have published a paper so-and-so, even though that was more than 10 years ago. Anyone published a paper in the print meaning of the word. So our journal is really old. We started in 1881 and we publish uninterrupted since. I present this picture of our first issue from 1881 because this is what they produced at the time. The editorial office produced this one print issue. That's all. And nowadays, we, as I reckon many of you also do, you publish primarily on the internet. And besides, many of you might have a print issue, and you also publish podcasts, as we do, several podcasts. And we have different other things and products on the internet. And we, of course, also do things on social media like Facebook or Instagram, etc., etc. And we also have newsletters for our readers, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say is to publish something today is very much different from in the old analog print days. So something has obviously happened, as you might know. And of course, publishing the latest news on paper is dying all over the world, I suppose. And publishing research on paper only has been dead for a while and cannot be resuscitated, of course. I mean, that era is over. But still, paper refuses to die. And this presentation is about why I don't think paper will die. And it's also maybe about why I think that paper shouldn't die. I'll come back to that a bit later. If we look to the Nordic countries and we look to the Nordic medical national journals, they all have thriving print editions still with consistently high circulation and readership rates. So there is something to paper, I suppose. And if you look internationally in my field, that is medicine, you see that the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, they still have a print circulation in US only of more than 100,000 copies weekly. That's 48 issues a year. So there is something about paper still. And if you look to England, the BMJ, they circulate also in print of more than 100,000 copies. And no, it's not only the pensioners who are reading printed publications, because the BMJ's student edition alone has a print circulation of 11,000. So, as I said, there is something about print still, but what? If we look to the general market for books, this is the book market forecast for 2027, and is forecasted to grow. So people still read on paper when they read books. And also still, when people read newspapers, some still tend to read on paper. In total, 29% in the UK and 22% in the US now prefer to read news online, and only between 12 and 15%, as you can see, of the youngest prefer to read their news online. But if we go to magazines, we see something different. That 58% in the UK prefer to read their magazines in print, and 47% in the US. That's half of the readers. So when people now prefer to read their news online, many people still prefer print when they want to read magazines. And interestingly enough, if we look at the young people, we see that in the UK, 39%, that's almost 40% of the youngest, that's between 18 and 24 years old, they still prefer to read magazines on print. This is from Trend Tracker, which is a biennial global consumers survey commissioned by Two Sides. I must say, though, that Two Sides is a global initiative owned by the forestry and paper industries. So there is a kind of bias here, but still. And this survey is conducted by an independent research company. So these are the EU results. And we see that the percentage who preferred reading books on papers went up from 53 to 65% from 21 to 23, and the percentage that preferred to read magazines in print went up from 35 to 51% from 21 to 23. So still there is something. And I think this has to do with the advantages that print still have. And I'll try to talk about that using this 2x2 table. As you can see, digital advantages and print advantages, and digital disadvantages and print disadvantages. So obviously digital has an advantage with its accessibility, because you can access digital content anytime, anywhere, and on a variety of devices, on your mobile phone, on your laptop, etc., etc. And the digital, of course, is also cost efficient. I mean, you eliminate all the costs associated with printing, distribution, and storage also. And interactivity, of course, you can have dynamic content like videos, animations, interactive infographics, etc., etc. And of course, also the real-time updates that makes it possible to retract articles and make that visible immediately, which is something that you will need, of course, in scientific publishing. And also the environmental friendliness of digital publication. Well, that might not be as straightforward as one could think, because data centers now are responsible for 2.5 to 3.7% of all human-induced carbon dioxide. That's more than the aviation industry. So every time we store an article on a server, every time you store an email that you send, you use carbon dioxide, and all in all, that's more than the aviation industry. So that's not so eco-friendly as one tends to think. So what about print, on the other hand, of course, has the advantage of being a physical product. I mean, still many readers appreciate the tactile experience of holding a physical book or holding a magazine. It's something about reading and touching and experience with all your senses, and even smelling, that I think that's still an advantage that makes print more attractive in a way than digital reading. And also, collectibility of the print editions is a point, I think, because print editions can be collected, they can be shared, and they can even be passed down through generations, which digital content, well, hardly can, I suppose. And print also have the advantage of having no dependency of technology. I mean, you can read a paper issue anywhere. You don't need a device, you don't need electricity, you don't need internet access. You can just bring it anywhere, up on the mountains or in a boat or whatever. And I think also the focused reading is something that makes print stand out, because when you read on the internet, you have all these ads that keep popping up and distracting your reading experience all the time. And one very important thing, I think, at least for us, because we are a national medical journal, we're here to unite the doctors in our country. So the readership loyalty that you get from something that you get in your mail inbox, that's not email inbox, but physical mail inbox, that's something that keeps you kind of loyal to the brand. You keep seeing it all the time. It lies around in your flat or in your house, and everyone else can see it. It's a kind of marker of who you are, the magazines that you have in your house. That's something you don't get from digital reading, which is much more private. It's not something you share with others that just come by your house or your office. So digital has also some clear Disadvantages, I think the tech dependency, I've talked about that already. The digital fatigue, that's something we tend to forget, that actually the average screen time now for users around the world across platforms and devices is 6 hours and 37 minutes per day. That's a huge amount of time that we use staring on screens, just like you do now. So our eyes and our body and our hands and our whole tactile self longs for something else than staring on screens all the time, and that's where print comes in. And also, there's much talk about data privacy, the GDPR, etc., etc., and digital platforms. They raise quite huge concerns these days about data collection, about privacy. Somewhere, someone can always watch what you're reading, where you're reading it, for how long you're reading it, and how you're reading it. That does not go for print. Print is something that no one else will know how and where and how much you read. So that's one disadvantage, obviously, with digital reading. And print disadvantage. People often say that there are environmental concerns with print. Well, there might be, but that's not so straightforward as one should think. To take our journal as an example, our journal is produced just across the Swedish border from Norway at one of the world's most environmentally friendly paper mills. They use timber from European forests, and European forests are growing. All over Europe, we get more and more forests. So our paper is also the first in the world to meet the very strict criteria for cradle-to-cradle products, which is an international certification for green and circular production processes. We have our production, our printing, our addressing, our packaging, and our distribution in close proximity to each other in Norway. And also, one must remember that not only Norway, but the whole of Europe has an extremely high paper recycling rate of over 70%. So all in all, I don't think, and this is very hard to pinpoint exactly how much, but I don't think there's much environmental concerns right now with printing on paper, at least not in Europe. But one obvious disadvantage of print is, of course, the lack of interactivity. Obviously, you can't scroll, you can't change the size of the fonts, etc., etc. And the distribution costs, of course, is a problem. Printing costs money, storing costs money, and distribution costs money and can be extremely expensive. On the other hand, with print, ads are more expensive on print. Ads give more income for the journal. At least it does for our journal, and I think also for other journals. You get more for print ads than you get from electronic ads. And that's because ads on paper is kind of more exclusive. It draws more attention. And the competition in the mailbox nowadays is also less and less. So that gives the advertisers less competition and more exclusivity towards the readers. So that kind of weighs up for the distribution costs, at least if you have ads. And one more thing, print editions, I think, and might be the most important thing, at least for me, that print editions are curated packages of content. I mean, you can carefully assemble them into a unit that guarantees a distraction-free reading experience. Something which means that you can also be presented with content as a reader that you didn't know you were interested in. That very seldom happens on the internet. But when you read a curated magazine, you not so seldom you stumble over something that you actually read that you actually didn't know you were interested in at all. So that's something you get on paper that you don't get online. And besides, there are no disruptive links, there are no multimedia or extra content, and unlike the online versions of journals, print editions have a beginning and they have an end. So the advantage of the printed version is, in a way, the absence of the advantages of the electronic version, I think. And besides, and then that depends on what kind of journal you are. We are a member journal as well as a national journal, and our print edition is the only physical connection that the members of this organization have with their organization. Everything else is online, digitally, etc., and humans are physical beings. So the print edition being a physical link to your organization, I think that's important, and that's something you shouldn't underestimate. So this is kind of the background for what we did with our print edition. And I think that there's a Norwegian researcher called Tellef Råbe. He just recently delivered his PhD at the University of Cambridge, and he wrote about the digital transformation of the news media. And he uses the expression ambidextrous innovation. And by that he means that to be a modern news media outlet or a modern magazine or a modern journal, for that sake, you need to both innovate digitally and retain your print issue, because maintaining your print issue that maintains revenues from ads, and that print revenues are extremely hard to transform into digital, as some of you might know already. And the print issue, Tellef Råbe finds in his dissertation, is extremely important to maintain readership loyalty, which might be even harder to maintain digitally. So this, what you see on the screen now, is our take so far. This is our recent edition about cocaine. That's the reason for all the noses. So what we did with our print edition, that we have made it a bit more dynamic, both with content and with the design. We have a wide variation in article length. We have more illustrations that we used to have. We have increased, for example, the number of invited commentaries to comment our scientific articles, and we have reduced the number of issues from 18 to 15, which allows us to be more selective in choosing articles for print, because print for in our journal was more and more becoming just a copy of what had happened on the internet the last 2 weeks, and now we're going away from that, and we're trying to make print more printy. I mean, more like a product on its own. So and we print now all our scientific articles or original studies on paper still, but now only as summaries on one page summaries, so that we believe that kind of condensing the print format will draw more attention to the studies also in print and make them live longer, we hope, as well. Yep. And just to wrap the whole thing up, before we open for Q&As, just one story about the changing media, which I think is quite interesting. You know, when the printing press was invented, as you can see in the screen now, people said that handwriting was going to die. We have multiple sources from time around when the printing press was invented that said that handwriting was going to die, but handwriting didn't die. It just changed role from public to private means of communication. And when radio was invented, people said that newspapers were going to die. Well, they didn't. They just changed role. And when TV came, people said that radio was going to die, but radio didn't die. And finally, when the internet arrived, this is one of the first Google starting sites. When the internet came, people said that radio and TV would die, but they did not. TV morphed from linear to streaming, and streaming is more popular than ever. And radio did not die, just morphed into podcast. And podcast is more popular than ever. So my point is that new technologies in communication, they do not die, they just morph into something different. Just as a print magazine, I think, also is going to morph into something different than it used to be. But I'm pretty sure that print magazine is not dead and will not die, just as radio and TV did not die with the internet. But the problem still is that no one knows yet the new role of print magazine, what they are going to morph into. We've tried to look into the future and do something with our print edition. Whether we're right or whether print editions will be something entirely different, we don't know. That's for the future to decide. So I think that was what I was going to say. Ines, back to you.
Thank you for a not only very nice and lovely presentation, but also for showing us wonderful slides and great covers. And you got a lot of positive comments about the covers of your journal and your activities there in the chat, I see. There are some discussions ongoing, and I think we would like to welcome people to maybe share their thoughts on their own. Sena, can you take the floor, please, because you had some considerations with regards to open access and quality and speed of print of publication? Okay.
Perfect. I think it's now working.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so this is great background information. I really like that, this thinking and thought experience that we just had. And I was kind of contemplating how does this translate into when we think about open access journals that are publishing immediately rather than more focusing on sort of an issue-led publishing. They still have special issues, but let's say if you got accepted in Nature, your article will be published immediately without waiting for the next issue. And I was just wondering whether your thoughts on how would that affect sort of maybe some of the integrity issues that we're having. I was thinking maybe it will be, for example, if I'm a publisher, I will pay much, much more attention what's going into the print version, because once I do a mistake there, it's eternal. You can't take that back. And I was thinking that I will be much more careful, but yeah, I am myself not so sure. So just wondering about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one indeed. I forgot to say that we also, of course, we publish online first, so all articles go immediately online. So what comes in the print edition is the curated package of what we printed. What we published online the last 3 weeks or so. So I'm totally in favor of publishing online immediately. But the thing about doing the print edition also is that you have time to think. You have time to think, what did we publish lately and what do we think could be interesting for our print readers? So that's kind of it makes the mistakes hopefully more often.
have a question from Mary. Asks, how many papers do you publish per month, and how many of those go into the print?
I don't have that in my head right now, but we publish approximately 1,000 articles per year. That's including everything. I mean, opinion pieces, scientific articles, I mean, the lot, interviews, etc. So it's 1,000 articles a year, and up till relatively recently, I would guess that 90% of those went into print. And now, well, we just recently started with 15 issues a year, so we don't know yet how many will go into print, but a bit more than half, I would guess.
Thanks. And they're going into print in the full length of the paper?
No, the scientific articles or the original scientific articles, they go into a one-page format. But the clinical review articles, which are loved by the clinicians, they go into paper in full length. Also because they are often quite heavily illustrated. So that's something they use in their work in a way. And the case studies also go in full length, because that's very much read, I think. I mean, no one reads full original scientific articles on paper anymore, I suppose, at least.
Maybe we editors, when we evaluate them, or reviewers when they print them out, to scrutinize them in detail. I have a question here by Francesca. Mary, do we want to unmute people so they can come in, or do you prefer me to read out?
I can unmute them.
Okay, it's Francesca Kochschul.
Kochschul.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you very much for the presentation. My question really was that I wonder if you think there would be a big resurgence in print again, particularly with the advent of AI and the general distrust that people are experiencing with online content and everything going on there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Interestingly enough, just before these webinars, someone in our editorial office said, unrelated to this, that that the advent of AI will make print great again. because if you get the curated print edition of some magazine or whatever from a trusted source, you know that you can trust the things that are in there. But journals on the internet can be hijacked even. Yeah, I think that you might have a good point there.
I see a question from Duncan. Duncan, do you want to come in?
Yes, sure. Am I unmuted already?
You
I
are.
didn't see that. Okay. Hi. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I was commenting, Ari, when you said that of all of the articles that you publish online,
Yeah.
a kind of a short print version will appear in the journal in print.
Yeah.
But doesn't that create complications or problems with citations, and how people know which version is being referred to? Do they have different DOIs so you know which is which?
I know what you mean. No, the print version doesn't have a DOI because it's not online. It's only in print. So our one-pager consists of the abstract and one or two illustrations. That's all. And then an invited commentary on the opposite page. So you get a fold out with the one-pager on one side and then an invited commentary on the other side. And the one-pager does not get a DOI because it's not online at all.
I mean, DOIs are not only for online though. They're just
No,
to
I know.
reference the article. But I mean, that's quite nice that you
Yeah.
have a nice way to do it.
I think that 2 years ago, we tried, that's quite interesting, really. Until I think it was 2 years ago, when you found one of our articles on PubMed, the reference was to our page numbers.
Yeah.
And when we decided to do what we now did, we needed to change that because original articles wouldn't have page numbers anymore. And making PubMed understand that we should stop printing on paper and that we needed to reference with the DOI, that was extremely hard. It's something about they didn't quite understand that we could do online first and make that into the article that should be referenced.
Oh yeah, I think doing away with page numbers is still quite a novel thing.
Which is quite strange, actually, because I mean, of the world's 40,000 something scientific journals, I would guess 99% of them is online only, and I would guess that no one is print only. So why on earth is it so hard to get rid of the page references?
Well, I mean, the legacy of traditional print publishing looms large over much of the sluggish changes within the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So Mary was wondering, you mentioned the commentary which you put side on side with the articles that you publish with the summary of the abstracts. How does that work in practice? And maybe some feedback that you had on that?
No, when we publish an original article, it goes through the ordinary steps with peer reviews, etc., etc. So that means you have time. The editors have time to somewhere in the process think that, oh, we should have an invited commentary on this one, and then we ask either one of the peer reviewers or someone else, some professor within that field, to write an invited one-page commentary on that article. And from time to time, we also give them the article before it's published so that they can write their commentary and we can publish them together at the same time.
Yeah. I have a question in what you described in your new approach on rethinking, should we go online only or will we retain our print issue as you did and change the approach to change it from a classical journal? You probably, what you mentioned also was the term magazines, you transferred it, your print editions. Were you facing were you facing resistance? Did you have to, was this approach an obvious approach to the people who you spoke to, or did you have to defend the decision? And how did you make your case based on the research that you've presented to us and how far people would read or wouldn't read a magazine and would want a magazine version? So what was your experience there? Because this could be relevant for others, maybe.
I think we did a readers survey, and we found out that, I don't have the exact numbers in my head right now, but I think about 90% of our readers, or no, sorry, I'll rephrase that. 90% of the members of our organization, which is the Norwegian Medical Association, 90% of them read our journal on paper. They also read it on the internet, of course, but they also relate to and read the paper edition. And what was interesting in our readers survey was that even the response rate was low, of course, it always is, but still, the interesting thing that was that the youngest, I mean, the students and the young doctors, there are article types that they prefer to read on paper only.
So this could also guide your selection of what would go in the paper version.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have, as many national academic journals, we have an owner, which is this medical association, and the members tend to think that the expensive thing about running a journal is printing the print edition,
Okay.
which of course is not true. I mean, we still make money on paper because of the ads. And besides, there is some evidence, although not hard evidence, but that if you want to maintain reader loyalty when you go online only, you need to put more resources into your online edition. You need to have more journalists. You need to have more articles. Things have to happen on the front every day, all the time, to maintain reader loyalty. So it might be, for some at least, more expensive to get rid of their paper editions than keeping them.
That's an interesting thought. For those who are here who were already, we have another comment. I was otherwise going to say that, Duncan mentions that he agrees with the print materials, with some of the comments, and what I was anyway going to call on Duncan for two reasons, because at ESE we had the discussion some time ago what to do with the journal as such and with the print version of it, and you all know what the outcome of it was, and maybe Duncan or Mary can give us some more insight into the discussions that we had at the time. Do you want to do this? Duncan, shall I leave this to you, because you were quite instrumental there? And then
Hello. Yes, I mean, first of all, I can say we had at least 20 long discussions about doing that. It was a very difficult decision because we are a membership organization, like Ari said, for his journal. And it was losing a regular reminder to members of the existence of the association, of a tangible presence in the world, that the association is having an effect, literally landing in your doorstep. It's there. But there were quite significant costs involved, particularly with the size of the association. I think that's something to balance as well. There's costs, economies of scale in print and distribution, which we factored in, trying to keep costs low to members, being able to offer membership as lower cost to a wider range of people, balancing all those kind of considerations. And also in terms of the journal, we did want to convert it to open access, where the vast majority of the kind of readership was going to go. And I mean, that in itself has been a huge success, because when it was a members only publication, because of the size of ESE, all the research that we were publishing was getting, hundreds of reads, but now it gets like thousands, some papers, tens of thousands of readers. So that's really good for the authors that are publishing in the journal, and ESE, even though we had to sacrifice that kind of tangible physical presence. But it was very difficult. And I'm pretty old school. You can see cassettes in the background of me. I like physical things. These brand new cassettes, not even old either. So I like my physical copies of things. But yeah, the cost benefit ratio. But perhaps, I think Mary put in the chat as well, which might be a nice idea, of having kind of presentation versions of the journal every so often, so that we don't completely lose the physical aspect of it entirely. It's quite a nice idea.
Thanks a lot, Duncan. Is someone in the group out there having further thoughts that you would like to share with us, some reflections or some comments? Otherwise, I would just give you the floor for a couple of minutes, Duncan, but maybe before I do that, Are, very many thanks for this nice presentation and the good discussion. And I really liked, and I think you coined a very nice term, paper refuses to die. I probably steal this, but will attribute it to you in one of my upcoming debates about paper or not. It's a very, very nice idea. I recently found the letters that I have written in the 80s and 90s with my friends, and I have to say we were quite surprised how much written communication we had and how well people were able to write. And you're right, I think it's a different having something in a form that you can take with you, that you can feel, smell. This was very, very important elements which we may forget sometimes in our enthusiasm for online digital only. And I'm sure, so as you said, paper does not only refuse to die, but it will not die. So we'll have many different formats. And this is also the pleasure of new developments, that the variety of offerings are becoming bigger and people are different. And so we can cater for more preferences. So now I would then stop here. Thanks again, Are, and pass on to Duncan, who would like to make an announcement.
Thank you, Ines. Sorry to gate crash your presentation. That was really interesting. I enjoy this conversation a lot, and RA's journal especially is a fantastic example of how to use print and digital at the same time. And we should, make more of your journal, RA, as a showcase for how to do things in the modern world. But I've been requested by Mary and by myself to mention the forthcoming editorial school for journal editors. Hopefully the title is relatively self-explanatory. I think this will be the fourth iteration of our editorial school that we've been running. It is a 4-part training course for journal editors or anyone interested in the role, the techniques and skills involved in editing journals, running journals as the chief academic decision-making editors that are involved in running a journal. Part of the school might involve defining what those kind of roles are as well. So this starts on the 3rd of April with journal structure and management session. And it's every Wednesday in April, 2 p.m. UK time. So we have journal structure and management, publishing ethics, peer review process and production, and the 4th module on promotion and indexing. And they're the first 4 modules. There are, in fact, 8 modules of this course. I can't actually recall off the top of my head what the other 4 modules are, because I've just had this imminent course in mind. But yeah, the first 4 modules will start on the 3rd of April. So you are invited to register. Mary, you put the link is in the chat for anyone to read the full details of the course, about the trainers, one of which is me. I'll be running the promotion and indexing session. And yeah, registration details, speakers, and more course details are available online. So thank you. That's my bit. Thanks for letting me do that. Thanks again for a great presentation, Ines. All right.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who attended and who contributed in the discussion as well, which became interesting, I think.
Yes, and I think as chairs, Are, we would of course always welcome contribution, ideas for what you would like us to do or what you would like to do with us or on your own as part of the ESE Nordic chapter. Please let Mary know and she'll put you in contact with us if you have ideas for topics of future webinars or any other activities. Otherwise, shall we say goodbye? Okay, goodbye for the day. Have a very good day. Bye-bye.